Welcome back to part 3 of chapter 1
of Act Omega.
Of Act Omega in Illusions. This is getting kind of scary. Let's see.
Popcorn.
This is 20 pages of reading stuff, and we're only on page 6, and I'm already starting to lose it.
And we haven't even gotten to the Toho and a Toho effect.
Oh, right. Anyway, who's continuing this?
You are?
Oh, alright. Sure, go ahead and popcorn me. Right. Inside the shrine, it is almost pitch black, so my eyes have to adjust. I place my shoes on the ground, tips facing the outside, as per Japanese tradition. Did I mention I'm in Japan, guys? Hey, guys, I'm in Japan. Japan is so cool.
This is also known in How Not to Write a Novel as Hello, I'm the Medieval Knights, wherein a character supplies their own context, pointing out obvious cultural concepts to themselves. Funny enough, the example from the book also takes place in feudal Japan.
The floor of the room was covered in tatami mats, typical of a normal Japanese home, but those are worn down considerably. Guys, you've heard of Japan, right? It's an archipelago in the Far East, and it's way past cool. Heck, Sonic is from Japan. He's way past cool, so Japan must be way past cool.
Does he get $20 every time he mentions Japanese culture?
I think so. I think that he's shilling for Japanese tourism. The wallpaper hasn't been changed in so long that it is peeling. The air is so musky that it seems that no one has entered this place in a few decades.
Well, at least you ended it right, instead of saying, since odors tend to develop over time in places that are disused. Here's how to properly word this opening paragraph, changing very little of the original. Inside the shrine, it's almost pitch black. When my eyes adjust, I see the floor covered in traditional straw mats, worn down considerably. The wallpaper hasn't been changed in so long and that it is peeling. The air is so musky that it seems no one has entered this place in a few decades. I place my shoes on the ground, tips facing the outside. See? No need to mention the cultural aspect. Any reader with any hint of intuition will pick up on this and see how it works.
Is anyone here? I quietly call out. No response. I look around some more and open the fusuma outside of the entrance.
You know, nothing is stopping you or any of the other writers from calling these things doors. That's what I keep saying. Like, always the people with the gratuitous Japanese. And you might say, well, I want to be authentic. It's Japan. I gotta use Japanese words. Sore nara nihongo de kaku. Eigo o kaite teishi. Anata wa nihongo no tongo o kaite babai wa nihongo hanasu. Wakaremasu ka? And yes, my Japanese is rusty, sumimasen.
So what the hell did you just say?
He's not going to say. He expects the reader to know what he said. Because, you know, he knows so damn much about Japan. It is a long corridor with fusuma on each side, presumably a resting quarters for the priest and or priestesses and workers. So apparently he can tell that this is a Japanese bedroom. It's by just the layout of the room alone. No furniture, no items in the room. He just knows that much about Japanese architecture.
And one thing about Japanese architecture is it's very modular. You can make one room into pretty much anything you want, so it's kind of hard to determine that.
But even if I didn't know that, I'm already thinking, so he knows this much about Japanese architecture, but not much about kanji. I've studied architecture. I'm you know, Stevo confirmed for Illuminati, so I've studied architecture, and I've had to learn my share of Greek and Hebrew to know a thing or two about architecture. So, yeah, I expect you to know kanji if you know about Japanese architecture. Stevo confirmed for Illuminati. I close the door behind myself and prepare to leave, deciding my mind is playing tricks on me when I see an object on the floor that I know was not there before. I kneel down to get a closer look. Popcorn.
The object seemed to be a black, rough crystal cluster, about the same length as the width of my hand. The crystal seems to explode upwards at a sharp angle. The visual texture reminds me of ash. Attached to the top of this strange crystal is a long silver necklace chain. I pick it up by the chain and hold it to my face. What an unusual looking crystal. When I look at it, some force pokes at a memory deep within my mind, but I simply cannot remember what it was.
That's because our hero is suppressing his memory of that one time he snuck into a cave and almost got raped by a shark in a white tuxedo after said shark stole the sacred sword.
So you
What? Do 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 do
do do do do do do do do.
What the hell are you guys referencing?
Using my hands to unlock the clasp, I move the chains to the end of the back of the neck and release the clasp to secure the necklace. Not so bad. Our hero is either a kleptomaniac or a fashionista, or possibly both. I stand up and turn towards the entrance to leave, but my feet trip and I fall to the ground. How convenient! I fall on my chest and gasp with pain. I try to get up and lift my right leg to a crouching position, but my left leg wasn't moving. I tug at it, thinking that my shoe caught on the flooring, but the floor was perfectly fine when I came in, except, it was torn down. In fact, my foot doesn't feel stuck. I snap my head to look behind myself, and in the half-darkness of the shrine's living area is a spot that's darker than the rest of the room. The same spot is where my leg should be. Instead, all I see is a black gaping hole, and its flame-like appendages were grabbing hold of my leg, pulling me into its void. Which is totally not a gap by any stretch of the imagination. Nope, totally not a gap. Popcorn.
Hey. It's it's definitely not a gap. It's Azathoth saying that he deserves to go to Gensokyo, where he will be tormented for all eternity, and he'll pray for death, but death will never come to him because death isn't a thing in Gensokyo, or something like that. Oh well, Azathoth is weird like that.
Yes.
Or he's being teleported into hell. Sure, why not?
Anyway, popcorn.
Fear takes a hold of my heart as I start to claw my way across the floor to the outside. This works for the moment, as my legs slowly broke free of the darkness. However, my body increased in size and strength, making my attempt... The body increased in size and strength, making my attempt to survive futile. As the entity grew, my other leg was pulled from under my body, and the formless vines gripped on even harder and pulled more of my body into its gaping maw. As if by some animal instinct, I started to scream for help. Of course, no one answered. I tried in vain to escape this xenopredator. Sorry, that just sounds so out of place. The word xenopredator. Here. Get your hands off of him, you bitch. And as I tried, my mind felt like it was being unwoven. Let's see, every part of my mind seemed to be fading away, and slowly my strength started to dwindle as well. All I knew was that my vision was being engulfed, and there was no way out. My body started to fall back first, and the deeper I fell, the less my mind was working. Before my mind completely disappeared, I saw the little black crystal with its rough surface attached to its chain and floating right above my chest like a kite in a calm breeze, almost as if time was slowing to a stop. The deep voice was the last thing I heard. "You've been asleep for a long time, child. It's time to wake up." So, what do you think of this Last Samurai fanfic, Spaz?
Wait, I thought it was a Toho fanfic. I mean, doesn't it have shrines and not gaps?
Nope, it's a Last Samurai fanfic, because it has a white kid, being cool in Japan, and he's about to become a samurai.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, what if this is a Toho fanfic? The only way I know that this fic has anything to do with Toho so far is that defensive comment we first read against his character being a Gappy stew. Otherwise, no flying, no Danmaku, no flying little girls. Heck, there isn't even a single woman in this fic so far.
And yes, this character is a Gappy. We'll get to that later. But actually, one more thing. There seems to be a giant pattern in this fic. It's a Toho fic because I said so. The character is not a Gappy stew because I said so. My character is intelligent and determined because I said so. Even though he walks into an abandoned shrine with a creepy voice and grabs a crystal and puts it on, intelligent.
Yeah, a lot of this rides on because I said so, and this is a clear demonstration of the rule show, don't tell. I mean, because what he's telling is that this is a Toho fanfic and this guy isn't a Gappy and he's intelligent and all that crap, but what he's showing paints a very different picture. So as far as I can tell, it's about a guy joining the Illuminati, even though it isn't. I can't wait till we see the part where Reimu is actually a muscle-bound space marine with a machine gun with a chainsaw for a bayonet. And despite him trying to be different, this fic makes a lot of mistakes that, like, we've seen in pretty much every Gappy Stew fic we've read so far, right?
Yes. For example, we have the new writer who, this is their first project, right?
As far as I know, yes.
And they're starting with a giant multi-arc H.R. Martin epic. But has anyone actually seen a multi-arc epic ever reach completion? Among all these new writers, like, I'm gonna make this big epic multi-arc story, and then it's like, okay, where is chapter 2? Again, my classic challenge to fanfic writers is just write a one-off vanilla story only involving the canon cast, preferably just using only vanilla resources before going on to the larger OC-driven plots. Though my stance is still that Toho does good by itself. There's more than 100 characters and enough flexibility to make endless combinations of plots with only the canon cast. And funny enough, as I write as I wrote the fic, again, like we do have our notes behind the scenes, there was a discussion going on the Toho Reddit regarding if there is such thing as good Toho fanfiction. And although I and many others believe there is a noticeable split between Japanese doujin culture and Western fanfiction culture. The Japanese love their vanilla plots. If you go to any of the doujin sites, you will see tons of just nothing but the canon characters with maybe a few OCs as extras. Whereas Western output...
Wait, what about faceless hentai protagonist?
Not those kinds of doujins. That guy seems to appear in every single... I think that's their equivalent of the Gappy fic, but the difference is, well, our fics don't have other things to entice the readers with, and if so, not done correctly.
just Keys to the Heart X chapters, that's all I'm gonna say.
He must have every STD known to man by now.
Come to think of it, there needs to be a fic of faceless male protagonist guy in regular Gensokyo. I want to see what that guy's like in his off time.
Well, he is a male prostitute.
Right.
For starters.
And here's something that's even funnier, though. There was a guy in the thread who tried to blame all of the Western OC output on me simply because I'm part of the Walfus community, which has existed longer than I've been around, but Walfus is an OC-driven community because it's a character maker, basically. It started out as a make-your-own Toho character doll paper creator thingamajig, and it turned into an animation suite, basically. And now that modding is available, it's probably going to grow like Gary's mod did in regards to how modular that's become. But basically, we have vanilla Japanese doujins, and we have Western OC-driven culture. And I even had to explain that I still prefer vanilla Toho content to the dramatic, grimdark, violent, overly serious stuff. I mean, Toho is a comic fantasy. It's not Ditter. That's why I wrote the story, to say this is not Toho. This is the fanfic world. But looked at it this way, the problem isn't in the OCs. I mean, there are good OCs out there. Minnie from Wiccan and Swords Girl, Okami from Call of the Moon. Good OCs exist. It's the storytelling. The difference is in the stories. What we have is not an OC problem, it is a story problem. And the people who resort to OCs over story end up setting themselves up to fail because they don't use OCs to tell... No, they don't use their story... They only... How do I describe this? It's the difference between using an OC to tell a story versus using a story to praise an OC. If you use an OC to tell a story, it works, but if you use a story to praise an OC, it doesn't. And it's what I tell everyone that I tutor, good character design means nothing without a good story. Before you design your characters, just practice writing stories. Before Ray Bradbury wrote Fahrenheit 451, a classic, he wrote tons of other stories. He's now regarded as one of the best writers of all time.
Yeah, I also want to bring up the fact that, yeah, everyone seems to want to make their first story an epic. That's like a musician wanting to start off writing like a 3-hour symphony as opposed to starting off with, say, a single or a simple song or, heck, a hymn. But, you know, and anyone who tries their first thing being a 3-hour symphony is crazy, you know? And as for art, you know, if you say, oh, I'm an aspiring artist, my first project is going to be a mural that's going to span 500 feet and depict, like, the entire history of civilization or some crap like that. You know, instead of going for, starting with, regular size paintings or sketches or regular size sculptures. You know, instead of these huge things right off the bat. Because if you do these huge things right off the bat, you're crazy and stupid. As for cooking, you don't start off right off the bat, you know, oh, I'm an aspiring cook. My first specialty is going to be, this huge feast of all the cultures throughout the world. And it's going to fill up the White House. And it can feed a whole country. No, you don't start off with that. You start off with grilled cheese and hot dogs.
And omelets.
Omelets. Omelets are good. Because those who start off trying to make, like, elaborate dishes, but they're not very experienced at cooking, are crazy or stupid, so... But the literary equivalent, people starting off writing huge epics instead of starting off with short stories or novels, that isn't considered like a Jaeger bomb of hubris and stupidity. That's just par for the course rookie mistake, which is what makes writing, to put it nicely, unique. To put it badly, really weird. So my advice to aspiring writers: don't start off with epics, alrighty? Those are incredibly hard to write and take a long time. And honestly, how many epics have you read? Really, just sit down. Have you sat down and counted how many epic stories you've experienced? As for me, I got 2. Lord of the Rings and The Divine Comedy. That's it. And I'm considered like a very well-read person. Spaz, you still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Sorry, I'm ranting on. But anyway, I'm not finished. But
go on.
Then again, stop and think about how many novels out there are life-changing and world-changing. How many short stories there are that are life-changing and world-changing. How many fables and parables and just little tidbits of stories that are life-changing and world-changing and are very, very well written, as opposed to the epics that no one reads. And people, you know, people only reference like one line from it.
Like the Iliad?
Like reference the world it makes, but not the story itself.
Like, everyone knows War and Peace, but who here actually knows what War and Peace is even about?
Yeah, good example.
Heard of War and Peace.
So yeah, it's better to write shorter stories than more stories. Less is more couldn't be more true than in writing. And I'll tell you up front, I know how hard it is to write a 50,000 word story. Wink.
Double wink.
It's really hard. So what makes you think, like, your first shot is going to be this million-word epic? I mean, just go for something that's short and sweet and can really change someone. Can, like, actually change someone in only 10 minutes, you know?
Heck, you can fit Aesop's fables in, like, on a single page. Several of them, in fact.
And everyone knows them. And I think the best example of this is Edgar Allan Poe. Name one epic that Edgar Allan Poe wrote. Name one novel that Edgar Allan Poe wrote.
Who?
Name 3 poems that Edgar Allan Poe wrote. Let's see, The Raven, Lenore, and Pay to Someone. See, I can name 3. Name 3 short stories that Edgar Allan Poe wrote.
Fall of the House of Usher, The Cask of Amontillado. Well, go on, HDF.
Oh, well, that was the first one that came to my mind.
Shoot. The Pit and the Pendulum.
Mask of Red Telltale Heart. The Mask of Red Death, yeah, that's a good one. See, Edgar Allan Poe is considered, like, one of the greatest, not the greatest writers to ever come from America, and he wrote poems and short stories. He didn't write these big, epic things. No, he was a master. He wrote short stories and poems, but because he was such a master at that, he wrote, like, almost exclusively masterpieces of short stories and poems. So, don't go for an epic right off the bat. I mean, only go for an epic when first of all you got some experience under your belt, and also because you think that the scale of your story warrants an epic, which it usually doesn't. Spaz, you got anything to say about that?
My rule there is that a story is only long as the content within needs to be told about. Like, it's better to try to make your story as short as possible and have it be long than to try to have your story as long as possible but to come up short.
Exactly. So, I don't think this 11 arc Gappy fic is going to work. Pretty much. Let's see, next thing. Like, after just the first chapter. Trust me, later parts will be shorter. You may think this fic has no Gappy simply because it makes no mention of Yukari and her purple vaginas. However, the hero we have is pulled into Gensokyo against his will via some kind of teleportation magic.
And funny, I was gonna say, and funny enough, it looks exactly like a Gap, but instead of purple eyes, it's flaming hands.
Oh, and I also mentioned the last fic was Lost in Gensokyo by Rio Abstract, and he said, "No, this totally isn't a Gappy fic. Gappy doesn't gap him. Sorry, Yukari doesn't gap him. Marissa does." But yeah, the character Rio Abstract from Lost in Gensokyo Invaders. He's a Gappy, okay? So, if someone who is a Gappy and has made the same excuse... Wait, how did I write this? Oh, yeah. So how come your character isn't a Gappy despite a confirmed Gappy having the exact same qualifications of making your excuses? That's hypocrisy. And of course, what made me angrier than anything else is that Brendan McComb put words in my mouth with that comment. You know, he honestly thought that name-dropping me would guarantee that he would be immune to criticism. Well, I'm right here, right now, criticizing his work. And he does have a Gappy Stew fic in his story, regardless of whether or not it's a Toho fic, and regardless of his insistence that it's not a Gappy fic.
And if you try to tell us it's not a gap, it's a portal, I'll say, well, if it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, swims like a duck, and portals overprivileged exchange students to flying Lullyland like a duck, then it's a duck.
Sorry, this version of my last remark for this chapter was pretty vitrolic. But earlier fics I would dismiss as mere incompetence, you know, that they're incompetent writers and think, oh, I'm writing a good story. Look how good it's going so far, and they're just being dumb. But I feel like Brandon McComb did me wrong.
But don't worry, folks.
You know, to put it more nicely than what I put down.
But don't worry, folks. I got a rebuttal in a sec, so stay tuned. Especially Brendan McComb, stay tuned. I have some words of encouragement coming up.
You know, in earlier riffs, I said, you know, you can really judge a person by their writing, and I tend to say that looking at a work of art is peering into the artist's mind. And this part of Illusions leaves a bad taste in my mouth. So I have good reason not to think highly of him.
Though, let's see, I wouldn't go as far as the previously mentioned vitriolic comment. I would chalk this up to just incompetent writing like all the other fics, and here's why. Although it has better spelling, grammar, and description than most of the fics we've read, it carries the same immaturity and lack of life experience that plagues the rest of the fics. There's dissatisfaction with a seemingly privileged life, characters stepping into dangerous situations simply to advance the plot, focusing too much on details that shouldn't be mentioned and too little on the things that should, and so on. Though if there's one thing I do respect about Brendan, it's that he's actually trying to write a good story. Trying. Not entirely succeeding, but trying. He's actually making experience. He's not a novice writer. He's on his way to becoming an intermediate writer. From the pose and from the behind-the-scenes notes he's got, he really, really wants to make this a good story. He even has outlines, and he's using the PACE model of story structure, which is purpose, angle, conflict, effect. This can be used for individual scenes or entire stories, and it runs like this. What is the point of the scene of the story, which is the purpose? From what eyes do we see it from, the angle? What do the characters want and what's getting in the way, the conflict? And what are the results of the characters trying to get what they want, the effect? The good news is that he understands the basics of how to use the structure, but the bad news is all story structures follow the GIGO principle. Garbage in, garbage out. Assuming the story arc is anything like what's outlined without spoiling it, one of two things is going to happen. Either we'll be pleasantly surprised by the main character's resourcefulness and learn things that we never learned before about that character, or we're going to facepalm as yet another Gappy single-handedly owns a Toho character in a ridiculous way yet again. And from what I've seen, what I've seen of his notes, Brandon really wants to make this a good story. Unlike the other stories we've seen where it's clear the author doesn't give a damn or didn't give enough damns, Brandon gives plenty of damns. However, even when we give enough damns, we can still make mistakes in the pursuit of our experience. Thankfully, Brendan, if you're watching this, these riff reviews are a pinpointed critique of where you made those mistakes, and how you come across to your audience, and most importantly, how to fix them to become an intermediate to even an expert fanfiction or just regular writer. This stuff carries over into like your school and professional life. It is writing. And I will say you have great prose, except for the tenses, but you can work on the tenses. We've actually had people say they've learned more from us than in traditional English class. So my hope is that this review here acts as your wake-up call. You got the passion by the looks of things, but now you just need the experience. And from experience comes better judgment, not just in writing, but all over life. But of course, just as good judgment comes from experience, experience often comes from bad judgment. But luckily, when we fail, let's see. Now, luckily, when we fail, people are quick to point out what they saw in us so we can get back on course, which is why we should never fear failure. Well, that's why we should dive in with abandon. It's why Tell Me Why So, or the guy who made Birdemic didn't know crap about storytelling, but unlike many people who did, actually went out and made their movies. And yes, in some cases, they may call you bad names or say mean things for your mistakes, but it's better this gets confronted in a critical review in a safe environment where our aim is to entertain and educate than it is for a close friend or an important contact to do the same later down the line because it wasn't addressed earlier. With that, my hope is that you turn into someone far, far greater than you could have ever imagined on the other side of this riff. But with that said, it's time to go back to the previously mentioned entertainment and education in the next part because we just crossed the 30-minute mark. So we'll see you all in part 4 of Act Omega with Spaztique
and Stevo. But okay, I got one more thing, but I'll get to that in the next part.
Alright, see you then.